everybody, Paul Sawyer here from the High School Theater Spotlight, having a chance here to talk to Melanie Flanagan. How you doing, Melanie?
Doing all right.
Hi. Melanie and I have known each other for a long time, so she's going to be one of the first people that I get to do this expert series on. So I figure we'll kick off right here with Melanie. How did you get started in theater?
I started my first dance class when I was 2.5, and the performance was Sesame Street, and all the girls were dressed as Big Bird, and all the boys were dressed as Cookie Monsters. And my mom says as soon as I got out on that stage, my face lit up and it just looked like I was home. So I kept going back, and I danced all the way through high school and college. And in middle school and high school, I also started performing in musical theater. I did theater camps, and by my senior year of high school, I actually got to start a new tradition of theater at Pioneer High School, where I went.
And what was this tradition?
My senior year, they did not have a third period for me. I had classes in the morning and classes in the afternoon, but they didn't have a third period, and so they told me I had to take music appreciation. And while I do appreciate music, I said no way. So I started my own theater class. I talked to Mr. Dini over at Pioneer, and I said, hey, I'd like to do a theater class where we can play theater games and really work on learning our craft. And he said, sure. So we gathered 12 of us, and what ended up happening is the very first day we all got into class, and Mr. Dini said, okay, Melanie, what are we doing today? So I tried to do some research on theater games and all of that, and I just didn't have the background for it, so we ended up writing a show. And it was the very first tour of the Pioneer Advanced Theater class. We only got to do it for one semester. The second semester, the class got shut down. But that semester, we wrote a show, all 12 of us, and we took it to a bunch of schools in the San Jose area, and that was my very first homespun production, and that leads into what I do today.
Which we'll get into in a minute. So you went to Pioneer High School. We've done a couple reviews for them, so some of our readers will know about Pioneer. When you were there, what were some memorable shows that you were involved in with Pioneer?
Arsenic on Old Lace is hilarious and ridiculous. And I was there before the new theater building, so we had the cafetorium, and the dressing rooms were back behind. Basically, we were in the old music room behind the cafetorium, and in the middle of one of the runs of Arsenic and Old Lace, the cops, who are supposed to interrupt a scene, completely missed a cue. Just nothing. And there was nobody to run and get them. We were doing theater in the round. There was no communication. They weren't even on standby. And so I was one of the, in the story, it's these two little old ladies who off gentlemen in their living room and then bury them in the basement. Spoiler alert, sorry y'all. But it's these two little old ladies, and the cops are supposed to come in and interrupt them having tea with the parson, and so we were just trying to figure out how to extend the scene with us.
So what did you do, if you can remember?
I started offering more food to the parson because we were having tea. So it started with more tea, and the man broke the first rule of theater. He said, no thank you. So instead of yes and, it was no thank you, I'm all right. Are you sure you don't want more tea? No, I'm fine, thank you. How about some biscuits? I was trying to figure out, what could I do that would get me off stage so I could go, yell at somebody to send the cops around the other side. And he handed me nothing. Just nothing. And it felt like 6 minutes on stage. It was about 30 seconds when all was said and done, but that moment, that always feels like forever.
See, now we could totally hang that person out to dry and name drop him now, but we won't do that, will we?
Nope, we won't.
So what was it like working with Mr. Dini?
Oh, Mr. D. Mr. D taught me a lot about actually running theater programs later. When I was in the program, I was always a little confused as to why the musicals had a cast of 100 kids, like why the program was so large to a point where it was difficult to rehearse sometimes. It's difficult to rehearse 100 kids. That's not an easy thing to do. And as somebody who was like a diehard theater kid, I was often frustrated. I'm like, what? Why? Why are all these other kids here? But but I realized that the more people that got involved, one, like it made their high school experience better, which is amazing, but also that in making the theater community embrace all different kinds of people at the school, you built a better program. You had more parents that knew how to build sets or could help with costumes or could do makeup. By expanding that range of people, you built a theater community out of the high school instead of just keeping it to the hardcore, like, drama kids, the 16 of us that knew every word to Rent. Like, you don't need only those kids in a theater program. You need all kinds of people in a theater program.
Definitely.
So it's one of the things I learned from Mr. D. I also learned that loud is important, and that sometimes you have to throw
loud? I can feel the air quotes on that one.
He is a loud individual, and when you're trying to direct 100 kids in a musical, loud is important.
Definitely. So what do you do now? Tell us about what you're doing now.
I am the director of production for the Little Orchestra Society, which is a production company in New York City that does shows that are theatrical concerts for children. And we perform I've production managed at Lincoln Center. We perform at Carnegie Hall. We perform at BAM. I've had the opportunity to work in all of these different houses, so we bring our show to these venues, and in addition to coordinating with the venue on all the technical aspects of things, I also kind of make sure the shows happen. So our company, we're the production company, we'll hire a director and a choreographer and often a writer because we're making new work, and we'll hire a music director and we'll hire all the actors and the designers, but somebody needs to make sure that they all get together and meet and see what's going to happen with the production. So that's my job. I'm there at every meeting. I make sure that like what the director and the designers are talking about doing is in line with what we as the production company can afford and also want to see happen as part of our mission. And that starts with the very first, oh, what if we did Cinderella meeting, all the way through to, holy crap, we've got a 15-foot tall fairy godmother puppet and a 20-foot long dragon puppet, because Cinderella's got a dragon in it when we do it, and that dragon is running through the halls of Avery Fisher Hall at Lincoln Center, and then I have to pack it up and put it in storage, and I'm in charge of that too.
Oh gosh. So how did your time at Pioneer, maybe your work with Mr. Deeney, and even with him afterwards, after your high school time, how has that fed right into your work?
Well, that theater class that I put together, and turns out I didn't know how to teach, Mr. Deeney was really excited about having a touring production. So that was the first show that we put together. We had that first meeting. We said, well, what if we did a parody of Snow White? And we started talking about doing it in terms of like different music artists. So Snow White was kind of Britney Spears because it was 1999. And so Snow White was Britney Spears, and the Queen was sort of like a Whitney Houston character, and we built a whole silly parody. But we had to design costumes, and we had to do lists of props and figure out who had to rehearse what scene and how to direct it as well. I ended up directing most of it. So, and we choreographed dance numbers, and it was putting on a show from scratch to the point where we could actually perform it with all of our production elements at different schools in San Jose. So that led directly to what I'm doing now, because it's the difference between taking a show that already exists and imagining sort of different ways you could present it, which is a set of skills as well. But being in the theater program before that, I had just sort of signed on for whatever the director was up to. In stepping back to the production side for the very first time, I got to imagine and I got to make decisions and say, well, what if we did this and what if we did that, and collaborate and work with my fellow actors that were in that class, and we wrote that script together, and we're all really, really proud of the work that we had done. So it's very similar to what I'm doing now, and I couldn't have told you in high school that I'd end up doing what I'm doing now, but